this example says write an equation that shows two different ways to calculate the number of objects in the given array. Each side of the equation should use the numbers 4 times 6 times 2 in that order. So we're going to write this time an equation. So instead of two separate expressions, we're basically going to do the same thing, two separate expressions, but put an equal sign between them. So there's a lot of different ways that I could find this. One thing I could do is I could just go ahead and find, like, I've got like these little arrows, boomerangs, whatever you want to call them. We'll just say objects. But like whatever these objects are, I want to know how many total objects there are, right? And so one thing I could do is just find how many groups of objects do I have, right? So each of these is like a group of objects. How many of those do I have, right? And so if I wanted to know how many groups of objects I have, that could easily be found just by finding the number of rows and the number of columns, or I'll say objects per row, or groups per row would be better. But that would be one way to do this, right? So I could say, okay, I've got 4 rows times, instead of saying objects per row, I'm going to say groups per row, because technically each one of these is an object. So really what I'm doing right now is groups, right? And so I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups per row. And so if I did that, that would give me that there's 24 total groups. And then if I want to find the number of objects, I need just to multiply that by however many objects are in each group. And of course, each group has only 2 of those little less than signs or arrows, right? So times 2 objects per group. So you don't have to do the part that I'm doing in orange, but just so you can kind of see how this would work out. 4 rows times 6 groups per row, right? So notice that the second number always has that per part, right? If I were to find that, that would give me 24. The rows would be gone, and this is in groups. And then notice that I'm multiplying that by 2 objects per group. So every single time I do a multiplication, that per part is still on the second number, right? So you don't have to do the orange part. It didn't ask for that, but just so you can kind of see how that would work out. All right, and then I want to do another expression where I do 4 times 6 times 2 again, right? But this time I'm going to change the parentheses. So this time, instead of the parentheses being around the 4 times 6, let's put it on the 6 times 2, right? So if I did 6 times 2, what would that do? Well, that would basically just find 1 row, right? So that would be like, okay, let me just look at 1 row, right? And say, how can I find the number of objects in 1 row? Well, I could say, well, there's 6 groups of objects times 2 objects per row, right? So 6 groups times 2 objects per group. And so again, you don't have to do this part with me, but this would tell me that there are 12 objects, right? Now that's not the total number of objects, that's the number of objects per row. So then what I would do is I would say, okay, that means that this is technically per row. And then once I know how many objects are in per row, there's 12 objects per row, then I can multiply that by the number of rows, right? And so again, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. So this is still the same order, 4 times 6 times 2, right? It's just I've changed the parentheses, and changing the parentheses is just thinking of it a different way, right? Do you want to find how many objects are in each row first and then multiply that by the rows? Or do you want to find the total number of groups first, right? And then multiply that by the fact that there's 2 objects in a group. You're going to get the same answer either way, right? So either way, and we should just have an equal sign between these. Either way, if I did work this out, I end up finding that there are 48 objects. So at this point, you should stop and complete the next activity.